everybody. This is Dr. Russ Jones.
And Brad Kennan.
We are wide open. How are you, my friend?
I'm fine. You Good. Get cheerier and cheerier every time I talk to you.
That's right, man. You know, summer's here, warm weather's here. It's a great time to be alive.
So I have a question for you.
Okay. Gosh, that was quick.
Your shoulders, because you have those big shoulders, man. I don't. How do you get this like this right here?
Someone's asked me because I've already had that rotator cuff surgery and I have to have another one, so I can't do overhead presses at all. The only thing I can do, I use a landmine, which is, you have a 45-pound plate and there's something that goes down in the hole and it's at a 45-degree angle and a long bar goes in there. So when I'm pressing, it's always at an angle. But
I just do overhead presses, but I don't have rotator cuff issues. So,
but Brandon Walters, the one that works me out 3 or 4 days a week, he makes me. He always says, if you want big shoulders, you need to carry heavy shit.
Okay, so
all right for listeners, and so it's a lot of those farmers carries the big, heavy kettlebells that weigh 120, 150 pounds, and you're carrying one in each arm, and you're walking as far as you can, and set it down for a couple minutes, and pick it up and carry it back.
All right. Well, I have to work on that then.
Yeah, there you go. I think we're at a point anyways. I was going to talk to you after we were on the phone yesterday that, you had all this stuff going on lately. Yeah. And I think it's, we talked before about you getting back in there with some kind of trainer or something. I think it's getting close to that time where someone's going to start pushing you.
I know.
Not that you're not going, because you are going.
Right. I go every day. Yeah. So I saw anybody yelling at me currently. So I have something new that you don't know about.
Oh.
It's in a black box right here.
Okay.
So I was indisposed one day and got an email and it said this thing and it was one of those what do they call it, where it's like a crowdfunding deal?
Yeah. I don't know.
So
I forget the word.
This is an Acaso night vision binoculars. All right.
Okay.
So I figured for $189, how bad can it be?
It couldn't be that bad, right?
It can't be that bad.
No.
So their claim to fame is they're the only ones that use AI to digitally get the image. All right.
Okay.
So I got it. I got it the first day I had it. I forgot I had it. So when nighttime came around, I didn't even take it out of the box because I forgot I got it. Because I ordered this thing like 6 months ago or something. So it came with a couple batteries. And I took it out the other night, pitch black. And to be honest with you, it did very well. I was very surprised. I have a 2.5 acre lot. I could see down the hill. I have a pond with a deck or a dock, a small pond with a dock.
Yeah,
I could see that pretty plainly. It's got digital zoom, like 16x digital zoom.
Does it have that infrared thing that's lighting it up?
It. You know what? It may have. I don't know. It may have some. I haven't read all the directions on it. I just take it out of the box and just turn it on. But honestly, it wasn't too bad. Because it is color. It's not green. So it's colored.
Yeah, our friend Sip that we're with.
His white phosphorus.
White phosphorus. How much of one cost?
His was what, $12,000? I think it was $12,000.
Yeah, so 12,000 was a lot to, I'm sure we all have much more than that. I have 40 game cameras at $500 a pop, but you're $500 a pop, not $12,000 at one pop.
Right. Well, plus, if we use our points wisely from our Cabela's cards, or our, Quicksilver One card or whatever card we have, or our business card, us owning businesses, we have employees have cards and, they use those on a daily basis. So hotels and gas and, all that kind of stuff. Anything I buy, I buy a $10,000 splicer and I swipe my card for it and I get the points. So that adds up. So, you can buy stuff.
Are you thinking about getting something to be, what's next? You spent $5,000 on a thermal drone. What would be your next toy that you would do?
Probably a $10,000 drone.
Really?
Yeah.
What is a $10,000 drone gives you? More time,
more capability, longer range, higher resolution, multiple thermals.
I mean, are you enjoying that enough that you think,
I don't know if I'm enjoying it enough, but I mean, I do. It's now the weather's turning and, it's not a tornado. We've had more tornadoes in Ohio than any other state in the country this year. So I just think it's the way that the next step to finding proof of Sasquatch.
Okay.
So I tell you what, we got a guy coming on tonight. He has some experience with thermals in Sasquatch. So we're going to go ahead and bring on Randy Harrington. Hey, Randy, how you doing?
I'm good, buddy. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you, Randy. Looking forward to getting to talk to you.
So like I said, I bought a thermal drone. I don't know, what was it, 6 months ago, Russ?
Yeah.
I talked to one of my buddies into buying one too. So Sip bought one too, and he's had his out all the time. I've had mine out quite a bit. It'll stay in the air 35 minutes, 40 minutes. Now that the weather's getting better and it's not cold and rainy and crappy, they don't do great in the cold. The thing that I found was that I can go stop, park, get my drone out in a minute. It's in the air and I'm flying a mile. Then I'm flying a mile over here. And I'm flying a mile over here and I'm coming back and I'm seeing what's out there without doing the squatch thing at night. You know what I mean? Because Russ always says that, daytime's for evidence, nighttime's for experience. So, but they do come out at night. And if people don't have night vision or thermal, it's just a wood knock or it's maybe something in the bushes. And I'm sure you've been out with people before that, you've had a thermal out and you've been out with them. They're like, oh my gosh, there's some over here, and you thermal over there and it's a chipmunk. And you're like, it's a freaking squirrel or it's a chipmunk. And they're like, no, it's way too loud. You're like, no, seriously, it's a squirrel. I can see it. What are your thoughts?
Are you asking me what my thoughts are?
I'm asking you what your thoughts is. I mean, because you're a thermal guy, and because you got some thermal footage, we're going to talk about that. So,
well, you actually touched on a subject that's a big part of the Bigfoot arena, and that is group mentality with Bigfoot on the brain. I see it all the time. We go out, and my God, everybody comes back with a Bigfoot story. And the thermals will show you that that's not the case. It's extremely rare. These things are incredibly elusive, and we're starting to pick up on a lot of the behaviors that we can catch even with the thermal, which is basically just a portion of the head. I mean, you just barely will see a portion of the head peering from behind something, and you're going to have to watch it for a while to see how it moves. Because a lot of times we've discovered that if you're facing them, let's just say this is how much of the head is looking over the top of a log. If you're facing them, we have seen more than once that it took 3 minutes for them to drop.
Jimmy Christmas.
Incredibly slow movements when you're facing them. So that means they think we can see at night if we're facing them, and that's the way they move. So they have no idea that we can't see at night the way they can, but their behaviors are showing that they move like a sniper when you're facing them. And if that was in the daytime at the edge of a wood line, you'd never see them.
My son had an experience through a thermal at night with another gentleman. They thought it was literally a statue in a graveyard because it did not move for almost 5 minutes.
Yeah,
and
incredible.
Then it literally just moved very quickly to the one side, went on all fours and took off. So we believe it was a juvenile, but it literally stood dead still. They were literally passing the thermal back and forth, watching it, and it would not move.
They didn't think it was a Bigfoot, did they? Because it wouldn't move.
Yeah, they thought it was like a memorial, in the graveyard, but it just wasn't right. So they kept watching and literally eventually it just went down, turned to its right, went down on all fours and took off. So that's why they believe it was a juvenile.
So what else have you found, Randy? I mean, you've been doing it a while, and you said they don't move.
Well, back in I think it was around 2012. I lucked in on my very first thermal that I could afford. I was looking online and I found ones that were made for Cadillac, so it was already set up for 12 volt.
I bought one of those. I bought one of those out of a junkyard from my buddy.
Yeah. Well, but I've seen somebody that has purchased one out of the junkyard, and they're pretty good size. Mine's a very little one. So it cost me like $3,500, and I bought the DVR that's supposed to go into your glove compartment. It was also made for like buses and things like that. So it's already set up for 12 volt, and it's designed to go on the front of a vehicle, and it has a 20-foot tether, which is made to go along the frame of the vehicle and up into the cab for the monitor. That to me is exactly what I wanted. I wanted a camera that would separate from the monitor, and a 20-foot tether is as good as anything, because you can put it 15 feet up in a tree while you're in your tent and have the monitor in your tent. So it allowed me, which I knew at the time, I was kind of learning behaviors at the time, to not face them. You can't be facing them. That's a killer of action. So we were able to determine that on several thermal captures that we've gotten. And the first time it happened to me was in 2013 when I saw some activity on the trail ahead of me. And when I got up there, I'm looking up on the ridge above me, and I see a little head poking up out of some bushes. And so that's the first time I watch it, because I'm thinking to myself, I need to determine what that is. So I'm going to watch it for a while. And as I was watching it, I thought it was disappearing. And I told the guys that had walked down the trails, I said, I think it's slowly dropping. I said, I'm seeing less and less of it, but it's moving so slow that I can't tell. And eventually, after about 3 or 4 minutes, it was completely down to where I couldn't see it. And I was gobsmacked. I was like, my God, that is incredible. It was moving so that I wouldn't see it, but it didn't know that I couldn't see it, with the technology. So I kept scanning that hillside. I was going back and forth with the camera, scanning and scanning. I hadn't learned at that point to turn my back on them. At that point, I was just facing everything that I was looking at. I was facing them. So I kept scanning the hillside and hoping that the head would pop back up somewhere else. And I eventually just looked down the trail behind me, and there he was. It had come down the hill and was on the trail that we had just come up, looking around a tree at me, and it was a small one. So to me, that's all I needed to know. That initial behavior that I caught it moving extremely slow did not happen again till 5 years later, when I was at the 400 and we were walking down the trail, and I'm looking off to the left, to the south, and I see another possible half of a round head looking up, and we stopped to look at it. And while we were looking at it, it did the same thing. And I immediately told Shane, I said, that's exactly what that one in 2013 did. I said, that's a Bigfoot right out there. And that culminated in us. Dan Nadrello was standing next to me. He's a biologist that we invited from Wisconsin. And that's the moment Shane went ahead and walked out there, and we went through the process of seeing how close we could get to him. And it was incredible.
Well, tell us about that story. What happened?
Well, I've got it on video because I was recording. And so Shane started walking out there, and you could see the critter. It had gone through this motion here where it slowly dropped to where you couldn't see it. And then Shane started walking out there, and it goes. So when Shane was starting to go towards it, it now changed its behavior to, uh-oh, what do I do? And you could see that it didn't quite know what to do. And I was trying to explain to Shane, I said, slow down. I said, it is nervous. I can tell it's nervous. And I think it had to make a logical decision at some point. When it knew that Shane was coming towards it, it had to make a decision. Do I bolt and get seen for sure? Or do I lay face down and hope that he walks on by me? And I think it made a decision to try to just hunker down and lay face down, hoping that Shane would walk on by. Those are distinct behaviors that we can learn something from, that they have learned, that we have probably walked very close to them if they hunker down that way, in deep brush. So to watch that happening in live action was fascinating for me. And I was extremely nervous. We did not know that it was a little one at that time. I just knew the shape of the head and its behaviors made me think that it was a Bigfoot, and being on the 400 where we've been finding all those tracks. So Shane starts to head out there, and he's getting close, and I'm trying to direct him which way to go because I can still see the heat in the grass. And so I said, a little further that way, go to your left, a little. I said, okay, it's right in front of you, somewhere in front of you. And he clicks on his light, and we hear him say, "Oh my God, it's looking at me through the grass blades." So he described the face and the color of the eyes, and it was trying to hide and look at him through the grass like this and duck back down. And at some point, Shane stepped around. At this point, he was about 7 feet away from it, and he stepped to the left to try to look at the body. And when he did that, he almost got hit with a rock. And Shane did a real quick penguin walk out of there, and he's like, something just threw a rock at me. And so we're all extremely nervous, standing there on the trail with a little one hunkered down about 75, 80 feet away from us in deep brush. And we didn't quite know what to do, because in the past, Shane had been involved in a situation where there was a family unit of these, and he and another friend chased one of the juveniles, and all the activity stopped and ceased after that. Yeah. So we had that on our minds. Like, we had never approached one in this fashion, and you could tell that it was nervous. And then again, a rock was thrown at him from another location, which tells us there's definitely a second one there somewhere. Right. So we're standing there, and I'm thinking, I was afraid that we were already killing the action on this property by approaching one of the little ones. And you would think that's a no-no. So me and Dan were going back and forth. We can't do this anymore. I'm already fearful that we've done too much. So we decided to go back to camp. And I know in retrospect, Shane and I have talked about this. If we ever have this, since we haven't had this happen again, we thought it was going to happen all the time. Since we were so early into this project and it happened. Anyways, needless to say, hindsight is always 20/20. And so we're gonna ride the next one out if it ever comes to that again. We're gonna make something happen to where the video is better than what we got this time. But we went back to camp, and we were like schoolgirls, man, all giddy, just couldn't. This was awesome. And we get back to camp, and I'm concerned that they are going to vacate the property and that's it. But you could hear them go up the ridge behind our campsite, and it wasn't 2 minutes later, you hear a rock come through the branches and hit my Polaris. And that's the kind of activity that you get all the time out there. And we were actually happy. We were like, okay, they moved in on the ridge and they're back to throwing rocks. That means we didn't scare them. So we surmised that probably, well, the next day on the investigation, we go out there the next day, recreate Shane in the position that the critter was at. We found the body imprint laying in the grass. It was one of the juveniles. The distance where the rock came from that almost hit him. Now, remember, that rock wasn't thrown until he stepped around to look at the body. And he said the little one clicked. He said he heard a noise that sounded like it was clicking its teeth together when he was. So he must have crossed an imaginary line where the little one was highly under stress. So that's the first time he heard the mouth clicking the teeth. And that's when the rock came in. So if those things put together means that there was a line that it was okay as long as he was up to this certain point. But the moment he crossed that other line and looked like he was stepping up to the body, it started clicking its teeth, and then the rock came. So that means that a one had a rock in its hand ready to go at any moment. And so it waited till that moment to throw it. Come to find out that from where the rock came, the next day in our investigation, Shane found a set of 12-inch tracks in a wood line and the other siblings' tracks. So the mother and the sibling of the one that we walked up on was in a different location, like you would expect when it comes to the behaviors of Bigfoots. They always seem to put themselves in positions to be subterfuge or diversion tactics if one needs help. So they had that already set up. It's amazing how maybe we caught them in the middle of moving down the trail so that they could keep watching us as we were walking down that trail. But anyways, needless to say, we thought that since she only threw a rock, and that was the mother, she allowed Shane to get within 6-7 feet of one of her juvenile or one of her children, and she didn't do anything until the little one showed some anxiety, and that's when she threw the rock. But I told Shane, I was like, man, I said, she could have shook a tree, she could have screamed at you, she could have done all kinds of things, but she quietly threw a rock to where you wouldn't even know where she was at. And I said, I bet she's got a little one on her torso that she's more protective of it than even that 5-footer that was in the grass. So that's just something we sat on top of for quite a while. And then 2 years later, we started finding some 6-inch tracks out there. So she may have indeed had a younger one on her hip. She wanted to get him away from the 5-footer that was in the grass, but she didn't want him to know where she was because she was being more protective of maybe even a younger one. Isn't that crazy?
It is crazy.
It is.
So let me ask you something while you were saying there, not to jump off your stories, but you said you learned to never face them. So whenever you're doing your thermal, or apparently whenever you're looking at one of your cameras, you're trying to get it so you're not looking at them directly. Is that right?
Right. So far, I've gotten the most luck. I keep a 6 or 7 foot walking stick that you can extend up higher or lower. And I have my little camera on top of that stick. And I've got the monitor on a chest plate hanging around my torso so that I can just look down at the monitor. So the camera's on my stick. I can spin it around and look behind me and look for heat signatures and look for movement. That seems to be most of the time we see movement that we can concentrate on is when our backs are to them. So that's when they make their move. Because certainly we've already got the evidence that when we're facing them, they move extremely slowly. They don't know that we can see them with the heat, with the thermal, but their behaviors moves a certain way when you're facing them, and then changes when your back is to them. So we make it a point even when there's more than one of us there, when I see something that I'm trying to figure out what it is, we automatically turn our back to it, and I let the camera watch it, and we were all looking at the monitor, seeing what it's doing while our back is to it, because that reveals a lot more to us now than staying facing them. That's why I don't like the cameras. Even Shane has a really good camera now, but I don't like them when you have to put them up to your eye and face them. That to me, that so far we've learned that they're going to be in hiding mode if you're facing them, and it makes it much harder.
Yeah, gotcha. I mean, you could be like the guys at the Wood Ape Conservancy and put a great big garbage bag over your whole body so they couldn't tell which way you were facing, and then you could look right through the bag. Yeah, I've tried all those techniques. Yeah, what I do is I've made a little trash bag enclosure on top of my tent, and I have the camera up in that while I'm in the tent, and I can just spin it around within that contraption. So yeah, I mean, I've tried so many different things. Have you got a chance to see one yet personally?
Oh yeah,
the thermal.
Oh yeah. I had a big encounter back in 2006 at the Chickasaw Park in Oklahoma. I saw a large male and a juvenile that came into my campsite while I was in my truck looking at them through the truck window. Yeah.
Is that how you got started with all this? Tell us about that story.
Oh, there's so many details to that. You will probably just have to have somebody go back and watch a podcast where I talked about it, because it's a long story. There were so many things happening that night. It was really incredible, and it started this journey for me, but it culminated with a sighting of 2 of them that came out from the wood line, and the big one came to the back corner of my truck, and he was moving like a gorilla, and he looked like a gorilla, and the little one was actually bumping into his right hip as they both jostled to get to the back corner of my truck. Oh, and wow. They positioned the truck between them and the tent, so they didn't know I was in the truck at the time. But they strategically put something between them and where they perceived somebody might be, which would be the tent. And the big one was standing up, straight backbone like you and me. And I had ladder racks on the back of my truck. It was a crew cab diesel 3/4 ton truck with ladder racks on it. And he had a hold of my ladder racks, was looking over the ladder racks into the campsite. And the ladder racks came to his clavicle here. And so the next day I measured my ladder racks, since I saw him standing right there, and they were 7 foot even. So he was neck and head taller than 7 foot.
Dang. Were you purposely in the truck then, or it just happened to be that's how it worked out?
No, I was purposely in my truck. A friend had an encounter at that campsite, so I was at this campsite, and I had a campsite set up, and I had blankets taped on the inside of my truck windows so that anything in the distance looking at my truck wouldn't see me in there moving around or anything. So that's why I'm sold on the technique of having blankets block my windows even when I'm out at night, so that they can't see through the glass. And it's a good technique. It's worked pretty good over the years.
So are you using, could you use garbage bags to put over the windows too, or?
I suppose, I needed it to be, of course, for me to be stealthy, I need to be stealthy too. And I don't want them to know that I'm in the truck. So if it's got to be any material that you can hear them, at least when they're blankets, I can just part them and look through the glass very, very quietly and easily. But I haven't tried it with, trash bags or anything like that. I don't want to make any noise. As a matter of fact, there was a time when the big male had a hold of my ladder racks, and my heart was beating so hard when I was looking down, and I could just kind of see my shirt going boom, 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 with my heart racing. And I pulled my back off the seat because I was afraid that he would feel my heartbeat through the metal of the truck. And so, and I was determined that I did not want them to even know that I was in the cab, because I didn't want to end what was happening. I wanted it to play out. And the only way it would play out is if they thought that I was in the tent, and that I was hoping that they would eventually move around to the front of my truck. And I had a camera. My plan was to hit the headlights and film them through the windshield. They never went to the front of my truck. They did all their business back there in the back, and then they eventually left. But I kept waiting, thinking all I need them to do is meander to the front of my truck, and I'm going to hit them through the windshield. So being trained firefighter, I had a specific plan, and I was going to stick with that plan. You couldn't have paid me $1 million to open up the door of my truck. I was having a heart attack. He was so incredibly massive and muscular. His shoulders looked like bowling balls. And I saw when he reached to grab the side post of my ladder racks, I saw a thumb pointing straight up when he grabbed it like that. And the other hand went and grabbed the crossbar on the back. The little one moved in behind the tailgate and dropped down. He had both hands on top of the tailgate and dropped down. And the big one stayed right there at the corner with his hands on the corner pipe and the back cross pipe. I saw his lats go all the way down to his hip. He was incredibly lean and muscular and huge. And with his back muscles had to have been immense for the lat to go from under his arm all the way down to his hip bone. But imagine the pulling power of something like that. And we know they break branches and all that kind of stuff, but that lat shows just how much pulling power they have.
Jeez. So just so I'm getting this straight, your friend has a sighting out there. You don't really know anything about Bigfoot. You're just okay, this is
no. I was well versed at that point, because this gentleman I became friends with in the Kiamichi Mountains. I've been going down to the Kiamichi Mountains since 2003, and I met him down there at 2005, and because he came down for the Bigfoot Festival, and I became his friend. And I was hoping to learn more about Bigfoot from other people that could help me see one. I wanted to see one, and he and I got a video of one in the Kiamichis that we call the Ridgewalker video. So you can look it up online. And at the time, the only person that you could really send a video to way back then was M.K. Davis. So we sent it to him, and he cleaned up 15 clips of it and sent it back to us. He said, whatever that is It's reddish brown from head to toe, and there may be a smaller one with it. So I've got that email with the picture of him with a cleaned up version, but it's called the Ridgewalker video, and you can just see a figure walking through the woods. And we actually caught that in the fall of 2005. But I was with this gentleman, friend of mine, and his name was Keith. And he told me that he lives in Pauls Valley, Oklahoma, and he'd had a lot of encounters in the Chickasaw National Park. And if you look up the Chickasaw National Park, Matt Knapp, who does a podcast show, he had an encounter there. Come to find out, in the same campsite that I had my encounter. Other people, Dr. Charles Hallmark, who has passed away, he had some stuff online about Bigfoot in the park there, and so there's enough history of what's going on there at the park. So when my friend Keith said that he and his wife would stay at campsite 30, and they had all this, he said he's seen a little one, and his wife had really bright red hair, and she's a very loud woman. He said, I think that little one likes my wife. He said, because it always comes around when my wife is there. And so here's a woman with dyed red, bright red hair, and she's very loud. He said one time she got in the car to leave the campsite, and he said, I saw that little one run through the brush and jump the road behind her car. And he made an interesting observation that I had not been able to confirm in any way, shape, or form. But if people take note of this and keep it in their mind, if they ever see it, I'd sure like to hear about it. He said when it jumped that little road in that campsite, it's just a one-way through all these 125 campsites. So it's a very meandering type single lane road. So it wasn't a very wide road, but he said this little one jumped that road while it was kind of following her car. And he said he had its knees pulled up to its chest when it was in the air. So
like
I don't know.
Long jumper.
Yeah. So I don't know if anybody can ever confirm that. If they see something similar, let me know, because I've never seen anything like that. But it's not like you jump with your legs spread like we jump a hurdle. It jumped with both knees up to its chest as it was in the air, clearing the road.
That's interesting.
That is. So I just looked on your. So a lot of this, you keep talking about the YouTube video. So you do have a YouTube channel. It's called, what is it? Randy Harrington, or is it
the Sensible Bigfoot Project?
There you go. Because I saw your logos like Randy Harrington, Bigfoot Researcher.
Yeah, and I do have a video about my encounter at the Chickasaw Park. I show pictures, I show locations, I show where everything happened, and I do have some game cam pictures from in the park that I believe I caught the juvenile coming into my campsite. I got a headshot, and when it stood up, I got an armpit, a shoulder and an armpit, but it was so close to the camera that it was washed out white. But you can see a head with no ears. There's no ears that would identify it as a cat, dog, raccoon, or anything. But there's hair on the head coming up, and it's this close to the camera like this, where you see just a round head, but it's all white. But you can see there's hair. And then it stands up. It looks like this right here where you see the armpit. And you can see the hair sweeping off the chest, going under the arm, where it caught the armpit, where it stood up. Because I had the camera hidden on a table with a bunch of other supplies stacked around it so that it was hidden just facing the wood line. And I got lucky with a couple of pictures when it came in.
So have you had any other pictures on game cameras?
Well, I've got another picture from the park where me and Keith were caught one. I think it's the big red one. I think it's the big one that came up behind my truck. And you'll see if you watch the video. We were putting out baits in a tree, gifting, one of those kind of things, and I heard a huff just up the hill. And so Keith spun around with his camera pointing up where we just heard the huff. And later, of course, like most people, you go through your pictures and like try to find something. But it's pretty clear that there was a big shouldered, pointy-headed gorilla looking down the hill at us, where the huff came from. And you'll see that on the video too. And it looks like it might be slightly reddish. It was probably the big one that came up behind my truck. And then the game cam picture that I caught was probably the little one meandering through the park one night when I was there. Because I went back there a million times after my encounter, trying all kinds of tricks to try to catch them.
So Campsite 30, anything specific or special about Campsite 30? Is it by a dumpster? Is it by the creek? Is it?
No, it's just, well, yeah, there's a creek. I heard like I said, the story's way too long, but it involves the little one going through the park by himself.
Okay.
Dragging a stick. He was dragging a stick. I could hear a stick being dragged, and he was hitting lantern posts as he was going through the park. lifting up trash can lids and putting the trash can lids back on. The trash cans back then were just the cylinder metal ones with the cinder block that would keep the raccoons out of them. But he was going from trash can to trash can, popping the lids, putting them back together, going through the park until he came to my campsite. And that's when he hit a tree. Up to that point, he'd only hit lantern posts. And then when he hit the tree, the big one crossed the creek. I heard him sloshing through the creek and joined him. And so eventually there was two of them, but it started out with just being one going through the park, looking in the trash cans.
Wow. So this thing, he's a pretty active juvenile.
It was a lot of these things I wouldn't know until after the fact. Other people were like, man, it only hit lantern posts up to that point, and the big one never crossed the creek. But the moment it hit the tree, the big one crossed the creek. That means they must have had a conversation about what to hit if you need me.
Right. Okay. I noticed that on your page you have an Untold drone. Is that a thermal drone? Is that the Evo 2? Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I bought. So I like it.
Oh yeah. Very, very interesting piece of equipment.
Yes, it is.
And I can tell you that we recently, just a few nights ago, caught something on a ridge that the subject was moving through the trees on, and the drone had a bird's eye view with the thermal on, and you could see the footprints that it was leaving on the ground. They were dissipating about 4 foot behind it. And so we're having that looked at right now. And
so whatever this was not wearing shoes, because that heat would not.
An ungulate would not, a hoof would not leave a footprint.
Correct.
Yes, we were very excited about it.
Correct. To go back to your very, very first comment about your thermal coming out of a Cadillac, I used a backup camera. You know, they used to have backup cameras for cars where you would have like a little app on your phone and you could plug it into video camera on the back of your. That's what I did. Is I took the Wi-Fi module, hooked it into the thermal camera, so it was separate, and it would actually install an app on your phone, so multiple people could have the app on their phone, and one person could have the thermal. So that was just an idea, you know, if it ever comes up again.
Yeah, same idea. Good idea.
Right. So, I mean, from what I'm gathering, how often are you in the woods doing this?
Oh my God. Every time I can afford to go. I enjoy it. I enjoy the process. I mean, I've driven up to Washington State more times than I can count. I've been to Paul Freeman's area multiple times by myself. Yeah, you name it. I'll if I can afford it, I'm going.
Have you had any other experiences at those locations like Freeman's?
Oh yeah. If you check, if any of you who are listening subscribe to my channel and check them out, go back to the Bluff charge. That happened up north of Mount St. Helens. It's a great story, and I play the audio of being bluff charged by one. You hear it breaking branches and running by my truck. You hear its feet slapping the ground. It was incredible. So that happened in Washington. Up in Paul Freeman's area, I hit a bug on my windshield. And I left my thermal at the Educt Pond. You know where the Educt Pond is when it comes to Paul Freeman. So I had my thermal camera at the Educt Pond up in a tree watching that Educt Pond. And I was out in other places. I was up at Black Snake Ridge. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, I was so exhausted, I just pulled off into the woods to sleep. And I had just hit a big old bug right on my windshield, and it was right in front of the steering wheel. So I never hit my windshield wiper because I knew it would just kind of smear it. So I ended up laying in the front seat going to sleep, and in a few hours later the sun was shining through my windshield, and I opened my eyes and there were a bunch of hairs stuck on those bug guts. Something had leaned across my windshield to look at me sleeping and left, and I got up on the hood of my truck and took a picture of it. You're going to see about an 8-inch long hair wafting in the breeze, and in the bug guts itself were smaller hairs where something actually had to press against the glass to leave all those smaller hairs stuck in the bug guts.
Did you save any of that stuff for Darby Orcutt?
Well, this was back in.
Oh yeah.
I didn't have any connections. All I did was I just put it in a bag and ended up giving it to biologist friend of mine who, yeah, it resembles it, very lame examination. But I was convinced because of how it happened. There was only a short window of opportunity. I did go back to that spot where I slept to do my own experiments. And here's what I did. It was late afternoon. I pulled off the road, the same place that I had slept that time where I got the hairs and the bug guts. And I left one of my recorders sitting on top of my truck. And then I just took off hiking. And then came back, a couple hours, and then listened to the recording. I sat in my truck and listened to the recording. About 15 minutes after you hear me walking down the gravel road, you hear a tree knock. And so I was obviously being observed, and it waited until I was well away from my truck to do a tree knock. So clearly, when there's one tree knock, there's at least two critters. The tree knock is being told to another one. Right. Maybe the coast is clear or whatever. But that gave me enough confirmation for that location up on Black Snake Ridge that they were there and they're in observance. And I probably got a visitor when I pulled off in 3 a.m. and took a nap in my front seat. And he just happened to lean across into those fresh bug guts that was just sticky enough to catch some of his hairs.
That's, for these things to be as rare as they are, to have an encounter like that is just pretty amazing, actually. You know what I mean? Because we go out all the time, and maybe they're leaning over our windshields when we sleep, or when we're not sleeping, maybe they're leaning on our trucks and we just don't pay attention.
Right. Most of the time, that's it.
We don't know.
Yeah.
So you did send us some video or some images that Russ sent me. So I'm going to bring those up. So here was the first image. This is through a thermal camera of some sort, obviously.
Yep. I was there at the 400 by myself for a 9-day stretch.
So when you talk about the 400, I assume it's 400 acres of something.
Yes.
You keep talking about Oklahoma, so we're assuming it's either Missouri, Oklahoma, something like that.
This is the 400. If you ever hear me say the 400, which is what we, it's just what we call it.
Sure.
It's a place in the deep Ozarks in Missouri. Okay. Shane invited me there after he had already spent a couple of years there. He was invited there. Shane lives in Springfield, Missouri, and he was invited to this property by the homeowner who inherited the land and thought he was dealing with poachers. He was on his property hunting, and he saw one. Okay. It started with him finding a bunch of structures and thought he was dealing with poachers. And then it culminated in him having his own sighting. So that's where we've been going. That's where we have the mud flats where we get these footprints constantly. So we know there's a family unit there. We've been able to gauge the growth of these same footprints over a 5-year stretch. We've had one set of siblings grow up, and once their tracks hit around 12 inches, never find them anymore. And now we've got 2 new, younger, fresher tracks being seen. So the siblings have been moved on and been replaced by younger siblings, which I have no idea what the population is, but it shows an incredible that we've witnessed 2 sets of children being grown up and moved on.
You know what the most interesting thing about this is? People say there's no proof of this creature. Doesn't it just make you laugh?
Right. So I was there at 400 by myself on a 9-day stretch. Shane was just coming in on the weekends, and he had to go back to work. So I was there for a 5-day stretch by myself. And I kept going back to my canopy where I have all my kitchen supplies. And I would take my thermal and just scan the creek behind our campsite. And I spotted this figure at the edge of the creek looking up over the bank of the creek. And so I've got that video posted where I'm talking to it, and I'm like, "Hey, buddy, I see you over there. I mean, let's be friends. I mean, I'm not trying to scare you. I really didn't know what to do, and I had to get my harness on, and I had to get all my stuff on if I wanted to go trekking, but I didn't want to spook it. So I was trying to talk to it and get my stuff put on at the same time, and not look directly at it, and just be all cool. And then I started walking in that direction, and bloop, he was gone. And I heard running through the gravel of the creek. So I get down in the creek, and I'm panning up and down the creek with my thermal, and I see something on the back of a log jam that the creek wasn't wet at the time, but there's log jams in there from when the creek is heavy. And so something was behind that log jam moving, and I could see the head bobbing on top of above the log as it was moving towards the far creek. And so I keep scanning the creek bank on the far side, and it's a really wide creek. So I'm scanning, and then I see just at the wood line pop its head up going into the wood line from the deep brush going up that bank. So I believe that I caught one looking up over the bank of the creek until I observed it. And then when I went in the direction, he kind of retreated, and I did the best I could getting down in there and film it the best I could. But I think I caught moments of it in the retreat mode, going up the far bank into the wood line.
Okay. So here is obviously this looks like a footprint.
Yeah. I was showing these footprints to how they step on pieces of wood, and they even break pieces of wood and step on sharp sticks and never re-step.
So I see
the metatarsal break there.
Yeah, I see the metatarsal break, unless that's a stick right there that caused the metatarsal break. But, I see the distinct toes and all that kind of stuff. So that's pretty convincing. And then here is another
that's where Shane was walking out to that little one with his head poked up out of that deep brush.
Okay, so here's Shane, and here's the younger one.
Yeah,
laying on the ground. Okay. All right. So, and like I said, you do have a YouTube channel, the Sensible Bigfoot Project. I'll have a link to that in the show notes or whatever it is. So if anybody goes on,
I appreciate that.
There, so they can go to your YouTube channel and see all these videos. You've been doing this a long time. You spend a lot of time and money on it. Like I said, it's kind of funny. I saw something earlier. It was a show on Roku or something. It was like Bigfoot Encounters, and I clicked on it earlier today, and it was like a couple people out west, and one of our people here from Ohio was out there on the show, and I didn't know she was on it, and it was kind of whatever. But literally they mentioned that there's no proof of these elusive animals, and I'm like, really? There's 80,000 reports in flats. Meldrum has 300, 500 casts. I know, Tom Shea has 300 to 500 casts. Cliff has stuff, handprints, teeth prints, footprints, video, thermal video, butt prints. Yet there's no proof. So,
yeah,
you're an unsung hero, and you do a lot, and people don't understand what it costs just to do this.
Right. Yeah. My wife, she pitches a fit every time I keep dropping money on this.
Oh yeah.
Your wife is a saint, man. She's allowing you a lot of time in the woods.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I enjoy it, man. I'm still ate up with it like a kid. I mean, I enjoy trying to outsmart them. And, and people are going to listen to me say that, and they're going to be like, oh, he's so high and mighty. He thinks these things can be outsmarted. I'm not saying that in a position of superiority. I'm saying it because I've got some OCD issues. And once I lock into something, trying to outsmart them is my only mission. And whether it's good, bad, or ugly, it drives me to try to see if I can't do something that's going to catch them.
So let's say you had somebody with you that was a staunch skeptic, no belief, and you were at one point in your time in the woods, and this guy was with you. What happened to make him a believer? No holds barred. Was that your truck incident? When they came at the truck in the campsite, would that be it? Or did you have another time where you thought, Rick, man, this thing's freaking 50 feet away. It's daylight. I just saw it.
Well, for me, I think it's an accumulation, how much stuff I have, but behind all that is, it would take you a while to get to know who I am as a person, to know what I think. I think I have integrity. I retired as a firefighter. Sure. I'm a business owner. So how I deal with people, it has to be honest. You better not be a joker or a player or trying to tell lies. Sure. So first it takes somebody to get to know who I am as a person. That way, when I tell them I saw this, they can believe it 100%.
Right. I didn't know if you just had kind of one of those eureka moments out there where like, this is the holy grail of things that I've been searching for. It's a daylight sighting from 50 feet, walked across the trail. I saw it. If there was anybody with me, there would be no question, period, of these things exist, don't exist, whatever it is. It's not a person in a suit, whatever. So I was just wondering if you had one of those like kind of eureka moments that,
I mean, it just depends on what everybody's level's different, but
yeah, sure.
So far, everything that I've told you guys is just a story that I've got to tell you with only little bits of evidence to back it up. So you have to decide whether or not you think you can believe me or not.
I agree with you 1000%. And I think us as Bigfooters, once we have an experience, we tell our story. And if you believe me or not, I don't care. That's the way I feel. I know they exist. You can argue with me. You can say stuff. You can, we go somewhere and, they don't exist. I'm like, okay, what proof do you have they don't exist? Well, the Patterson Gimlin, I'm like, so let's start with the Patterson Gimlin. I can give you 50 reasons why it was real. And I can, you know what I mean? It's not fake. Literally you can do that. And you can do the same thing. I'm sure you can say, hey, what about, you're in your living room and I'm in the middle of the woods at 2 a.m. You know what I mean? You're asleep. I'm in the woods. I'm sleeping in my truck.
There was another time that I was up in the Walla Walla Mountains, Paul Freeman's area, and I was in an area where there's actually a placard on a tree dedicated to Wes Summerlin, who was a friend of Paul Freeman's, who's you probably read about him in some of Paul's books. Yeah. But so I was in that area with a naturalist from Georgia. His name was J.C. Williams. And he was there for a month doing some game camera projects. And so I was there doing some Bigfooting, and we just happened to meet up for 2 years in a row in that same campsite. So I would carry up to the head of that spring a tent and set it up with a recorder, and then go back down to the campsite to try to get some of the recordings of what was going on up on the ridge. So for 2 nights, I got all kinds of tree knocks. We were hearing tree knocks left and right. So of course the naturalist and I, while I'm listening to it on my computer, I'm letting him hear them. I said, he's like, there's got to be an answer to what those are. There's got to be a natural answer to what are those knocks? And I said, well, let's narrow it down. It only seems to be happening up there on the ridge. Why isn't it happening in the woods right here next to camp if it's naturally occurring in the trees themselves? Why is it only up there where this recorder's at? There's something going on up on that ridge where they're feeling free enough to talk to each other with their tree knocks. And so for the second night, and I probably got 15 or 20 knocks that night recorded. The second night, we went through that again. And as I'm listening to it, I heard something and I said, JC, you've got to hear this. You could hear a stick hitting a tree and the stick broke, and you hear it clamor and fall after it got like a bat that got broke when it hit the tree.
Right.
And he goes, well, that sure changes things. So they're using a physical stick, because I've heard people say, how do you know they're not using their mouth or popping their chest?
Yeah, mouth pops or hand claps. Or
I know the little one in the park was dragging a stick because I could hear it being dragged through the gravel, and he was hitting the lantern post with it as he was walking. So at least that night it had a physical stick in its hand. And then up here in the Walla Walla Mountains at a completely different time, you hear one of the sticks hit the tree and break and fall. So at least 2 times they have an actual physical stick in their hand. Doesn't mean that they can't use their mouth or their chest, but I do know that at times they are actually using a stick.
You talked about the behaviors, like, you try to turn your back to them. Is there any other behaviors you picked up in the last 15 years that you think, I didn't know that, or people don't know that, something you can tell people that, you've learned or perceived to be true?
Well, you might start by taking a picture of your camp table at night so that you can actually look at the picture, because I've had two times at the 400 where we've come back to camp, and if it wasn't for my OCD, we would have never have caught it, that they were going through the stuff on our table. But there were only one thing out of place. It was I had a silverware box with a plastic silverware that I pull all my stuff out of, my utensils. It was laying on its side. And I told Shane, I said, my OCD would not allow that. I would never be able to allow that box to be laying on its side. I said, I always pull the silverware out of it standing up right next to that other box. I said, something's been on our table. And I said, if it was a raccoon, that was right next to the table, to the box full of food. that food was not molested. I said, so it wasn't a raccoon on the table. So we started putting a recorder on the table once we realized something's been on our table that we suspect was one of them. The next time that we had something happen, at the end of the table was the orange 5-gallon water jug, and I'd have handy wipes, wet naps on the top, and my cup. When we come back to the table, I look at the table, and immediately those wet naps that were on top of the water jug was sitting on the table. And I said, that's different. I said, those are always on top of the water jug. I never put them on the table. Something put those on the table. So we listen to the recording, and you hear something playing with a zipper on one of the bags right next to the recorder, and then moving down to each box and digging through each box. You can hear when it gets to the box that has the pans, because you can hear the pans clank together. It's examining each box, and when it gets all the way to the end of the table, you hear the wrinkled wet nap being messed with. And so we go over and we look at the wet nap, and sure enough, one of the wet naps was pulled 3/4 of the way out with dirty smudge marks on it where fingers had pulled it out.
Wow.
So they're punchy, slow, but they're not really cognizant of leaving things exactly the way that they were.
Think they try. I think we're dealing with juveniles.
Tough
I think
to put a wet nap back in the box. You know what I mean?
The bulk of the activity that we're dealing with is to juveniles, and I think that the reason that happens most of the time is because of how undisciplined they are. They're having to learn their discipline, and the mother is allowing that. I got one. I know we're about to reach the 60-minute mark here, but I got to tell you one more story that you are going to like.
Okay.
Shane and I spent 2 hours cutting a trail going up to an area that we call Crawler Ridge, because there, and he had a GoPro looking over his shoulder, and he caught a head popping up, following him along, looking over the ridge at him. So we started calling that Crawler Ridge. So we went up there one night, cut a trail, set a tent up, and the tent was, and we gave them the 50-foot higher was the top of the ridge. So we gave them the top of the ridge, and we camped just below that. We were pelted with rocks all night long. Rocks were hitting around campsite all night long, and we're laying in the tent listening to these rocks being thrown, talking about it, and we're like, man, it has to be the juveniles. Nothing else can spend that much time doing nothing but throwing rocks, because the adults have things to do. I said, so the next day Shane goes up there and he finds where the two sets of tracks came in on the back side of that ridge and spent the majority of their time just above us on that ridge. So here's what we did. Shane gathered up about 30 or 40 hand-sized rocks. We took a Sharpie pen. We put marks on the rocks. We went up there where the footprints were found, and we placed them all with the marked sides down. The next night, we were pelted with rocks again. The next day, we get up and we start looking around. We find the rocks that we had marked and placed up there.
So you're doing things that a lot of people may not think about doing. And number one, you're getting interaction that a lot of people just don't have. I mean, you spend years and years in the woods and you never have that. You know, you might have that interaction one time in 5 years. You know what I mean? And you're out in the woods a lot, and you know, it's that thing about, you know, consistency of when you're old, you go to the gym, you have to be consistent. When you're looking for Bigfoot, you have to be consistent also. So
yeah.
But marking those rocks was such a simple thing to do. Right. I couldn't believe how ingenious it was to mark the rocks and have them thrown back at us, and to where we could actually film that we picked one up, because we heard one hit the Polaris. So we're over there looking around the Polaris with the camera going, and there's a rock by the tire. We pick it up and turn it over, and there's a mark on it. It's one of the rocks that we had marked and put up there. So that just is peeling back the layers of the onions, that first of all, now we know they are indeed throwing rocks. We're not misidentified. Some people do misidentify acorns falling out of a tree and walnuts falling out of a tree. That's common. But in this instance, they were actually throwing rocks that we had marked and placed up there by their footprints. And as long as they don't get discovered, they will keep using the same place to encroach. We've also learned that. I've got a video talking about behaviors and communication. If you watch that, you're going to show that over a 15-year period, it used the same approach every time. And I've proved that in multiple ways. So that's, again, Russ, that's another behavior that I can give you that just came to my mind, that as long as you don't show that you see them, they'll keep using the same trajectory.
I'd love to give you back on and let you go in depth about that encounter at the truck that you said, you know, it takes a long time to go through it, but
yeah,
I think people would really love to hear it. I'd love to really hear the whole story behind that. So maybe you'll do us
Absolutely.
the privilege of having
Yeah,
you back
yeah.
on.
It'll need a full hour on its own.
Okay, that'd be great because I can do nothing. That'd be awesome.
Man, it was so great to meet you, and it was so I was with Matt Pruitt this weekend with the Small Town Monsters guys in Tennessee, and Matt and I were talking about, there's only about 50 people in the country that are really out there a lot. There's thousands that are interested, but not that many people out there, and it's nice to meet another kindred spirit. And I admire you, and I know Brad and we just really appreciate your time tonight.
Well, I can see us sharing a campsite or a campfire in the future.
Oh yeah, that'd be awesome. If we can get Russ has to stay in a camper, bro. We're at a hotel.
I'm getting a little soft, aren't I?
You're getting a little soft. We're all getting a little soft as we get older. So
yeah, that's
anyway.
Right. Hey, thanks so much, Randy.
Yeah. All right.
I appreciate you guys.
And like I said, the Sensible Bigfoot Project on YouTube, anything else, Instagram, Facebook, anything like that.
I'm not that tech savvy.
Okay. So the Sensible Bigfoot Project, like and subscribe on there. I already just went on a little bit ago and subscribed. Randy's
on Facebook.
Yeah. So anyway, great. And we'll make sure we send you a link or whatever so people can do that. So Randy, we appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Well, that was interesting, and I didn't have to do a lot anyway.
No, he's great.
Yeah, that hour went by really quick. So
Cliff Barrett says he likes having me on because he just winds me up and turns me loose. And that's what Randy did for us. I mean, some great stories there, and I think it's cool that, especially like them marking the rocks and leaving the rocks there to see what would happen. And I mean, you were really on that.
What?
You were really interested in that, and I could see your mind going, "Hey, we did that, so now what we could do next."
Right. I mean, those are little things that you don't think about doing because you don't have interactions very often. So when something happens, you're just like, you're so surprised and so not used to being in that situation. So for him to mark that, do that, get the return, get a result from an experiment that he did, prove something. So anyway.
Yeah.
All right.
TheBigfootDoc.com. West Virginia Facebook page, West Virginia Bigfoot, Wide Open Research. I also want to say, I know you told me that we've been getting a lot of emails from listeners suggesting people they'd like to hear from, people they'd like us to talk to. So we appreciate everybody for reaching out with their comments. And, it's great. It always makes you, when it's just the two of us, sometimes you wonder if it's just the two of you.
Right, exactly.
There's two of us out there.
You're right. Exactly. So next week we'll drop a show for the Ohio Bigfoot Conference. We're going to have Mark DeWorth on.
Yeah.
The Bigfoot Conference is, I do believe,
next week.
Next week, yeah.
Yeah.
Not this weekend, next week. I can't remember what day it is, but it'll be not this weekend, but the following weekend. So we'll have Mark on. We'll talk about the conference coming up. It's the largest Bigfoot conference in the country, I do believe.
Yeah. And it's a good chance. We always enjoy going because we're catching up with our friends and seeing everybody in Bigfoot world. And so that's always something to look forward to. But, if you would, please like and subscribe. And
or if you got any, like I said, we're going to be there with a lot of the other people in the Bigfoot world. If you got any questions you want us to ask them, talk to them, whatever, we can bring it up. I think we're probably going to do a show from there. So for the following week after the conference, we'll grab some people, bring them on.
Yeah.
Maybe get some of your questions. If you submit some questions, we'll definitely grab some of the people in the Bigfoot world and see.
Last year, a lot of people came up to us to tell us they were listeners. So if you're around, please say hi to Brad and I. And if you have a story to tell us, a lot of times we're carrying our calendars, set people up to put them on the show, and but we always like to hear a good Bigfoot story.
Absolutely. All right.
Hey, thanks everybody. We appreciate you.
We're out of here.